The bass from the DJ booth pulsed through the floor, vibrating the stem of the champagne flute in Ava Monroe's hand. The after-party was in full swing, chandeliers glittering overhead, laughter spilling from clusters of designers, models, and photographers in the grand ballroom of the Grand Lion Hotel. Her spring collection had just debuted to a packed house, the standing ovation still fresh in her mind. But the moment that would stay burned into her memory that night wasn't the applause. It was the sudden, disgusting feel of a stranger's hand gripping her from behind. The touch was crude, possessive, and public. She spun sharply, the metallic scent of perfume and alcohol in the air, to find two men towering over her. They were familiar, both male models from another designer's lineup, already tipsy, the sheen of sweat on their brows. One smirked, leaning in close, the smell of whiskey on his breath. "Nice fabric," he said, his voice a mockery, his eyes clearly not on the dress. Gasps and muffled laughs bubbled from the small circle of people nearby, most pretending to be absorbed in their phones or drinks. Ava's pulse roared in her ears. She was a 29-year-old designer who had clawed her way into the fashion world with grit vision and sleepless nights, and here she was, reduced to a prop in someone else's crude joke. Her first instinct was to walk away, to keep the peace, and avoid a scene. But the moment she saw the smirk on the second man's face, the one who thought he could lean on his height, his looks, and his connections to get away with anything, the decision was made for her. She didn't snap or shove them then. She'd learned too much from the business side of fashion to waste her strike without the right timing. In design, as in life, the reveal was everything. She stepped back, giving herself space, letting her expression shift into one of icy control. Her hands were steady, her spine straight. She could feel eyes on her from across the room, especially from the women who had seen what just happened, but knew the unspoken rule in this industry: you either swallowed it or risked being labeled difficult. Ava had never cared much for unspoken rules. The men laughed under their breath, clinking their glasses, and turned slightly toward the bar. Ava watched them in the reflection of a mirrored column. They weren't done. Men like that never were. And when they came back for round two, she would make sure the entire room saw exactly how wrong they were to think she was an easy target. Her heart rate slowed, her mind already sketching the scene, the angle, the light, the audience. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about control, about taking back the moment they tried to own. She could feel the leather strap of her stiletto biting gently into her ankle, reminding her that she wasn't defenseless. Somewhere in the crowd, the DJ switched tracks, the beat rising. The models were circling back toward her, their drinks sloshing in their glasses, that same lazy arrogance in their stride. Ava didn't move. Let them come. Ava didn't bother pretending to mingle. She stood near the crystal punch fountain, the golden glow from the chandelier bathing her in warm light, one hand loosely cradling her champagne. The two men were working their way back toward her, weaving through the crowd like predators confident in their hunt. She studied them without making it obvious, her gaze drifting over their movements, the way she would assess the drape of a garment or the line of a stitch. The taller one, Cole, was the instigator. She recognized him now from a Milan show last season, famous for his smirk and infamous backstage for his temper. The other rider was quieter, more of a follower, but with the same smug look that made Ava's skin crawl. They stopped at a small group of influencers by the bar, leaning in to share something that got a few nervous chuckles. Ava knew her name was already in that conversation, and not in a way she would appreciate. That was fine. The more eyes they drew to themselves, the better. She adjusted her posture, subtly shifting her weight so her right heel rested lightly on the floor. The slim, black stiletto was more than a fashion statement. It was a weapon. if you knew how to use it. She did. Years before her design career took off, she'd taken a women's self-defense workshop in New York, a class she'd never thought she'd need, but never regretted. Cole finally broke away from his circle, Ryder following. They closed in from either side, feigning casual interest in the conversation Ava was having with a fellow designer. She could smell the alcohol on them before she even turned her head. Still mad about earlier, Cole's voice was low enough for the words to feel private, but his grin was for the room. Ava took a slow sip of champagne, letting the silence stretch just long enough for discomfort to bloom. "Mad implies you matter," she replied, her tone cool, her eyes scanning past him as though he were nothing more than background noise. That flash of irritation across his features was all the confirmation she needed. She had his ego hooked. And egos like loose threads were easy to pull until the whole thing unraveled. Ryder moved closer, his arm brushing her shoulder, a calculated provocation. "Don't be so cold," he said, with mock charm. "We're just having a little fun." Fun. The word lodged in her mind, like a pin jammed in fabric, holding the moment taut. Her gaze flicked briefly to the mirror across the room. The angle was perfect. Plenty of people within view, some already half watching, ready to witness what came next. She set her champagne glass down gently on the table beside her. "You should step back," she said evenly, giving them one last chance, the same way she'd give an errant intern one final warning before tearing apart sloppy work. Cole smirked, leaning in as though to whisper in her ear. Ryder chuckled under his breath. That was their mistake. Her right foot shifted imperceptibly, the sharp heel position just above the leather of Cole's dress shoe. She could already feel the precise point where it would land, the force she'd drive through it. All that was left was for him to give her the excuse. Cole's breath brushed Ava's ear, his voice dripping with mock intimacy. "What's the matter? Designer? Afraid to get your hands dirty?" That was it, the final straw. Before his smirk could widen, Ava's heel came down hard, the razor-sharp stiletto driving into the soft arch of his foot through the thin leather of his shoe. The sound wasn't loud, just a muted, satisfying crunch, but Cole's reaction was explosive. His smug grin shattered into a strangled cry, his glass of whiskey sloshing wildly as he staggered backward. The music didn't stop, but it didn't have to. Conversations faltered, heads turned, and the golden light seemed to freeze over the scene. Ryder's jaw dropped, eyes darting between Cole's doubled-over frame and Ava, who stood calm and composed, her breathing steady, her expression unreadable. Cole clutched his foot, limping, a flush of red climbing up his neck. He started, but the words dissolved into a groan. Ava tilted her head, her voice sharp enough to cut through the low bass line pulsing in the background. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Did I step on something delicate?" Gasps and low laughs rippled through the onlookers, the tension snapping into a mix of amusement and disbelief. Camera flashes erupted from nearby phones, the kind of images that could live online forever. Ryder tried to recover the moment, stepping toward her with a forced laugh. "All right, calm down. We were just..." She cut him off without raising her voice. "Just what?" "Testing. How far you could push me in front of my peers, seeing if I'd let you get away with it, because you're models." Her gaze locked on his, the weight of it enough to make him take half a step back. Cole was still wincing, his attempt to stand tall, undermined by the way his weight kept shifting off the injured foot. "You're gonna regret this," he hissed under his breath, but the words lacked their earlier venom. Ava straightened her chin high, her voice carrying just enough to reach the nearest clusters of guests. "I regret thinking either of you had enough class to be in the same room with the people who actually work to create something beautiful." It landed like a final stitch, sealing a seam clean tight and impossible to pull apart. The crowd's energy shifted. Some of the women were smiling now, a few even clapping softly. The men who'd been standing on the sidelines avoided her gaze, perhaps remembering their own past behavior. Cole and Ryder, however, were trapped both by the people watching and the fact that every step they took toward the exit would be caught on dozens of phones. Ryder muttered something to Cole, who nodded stiffly, still favoring his injured foot. Together, they began making their way toward the double doors, their retreat as visible as their arrival had been. Ava didn't follow. She simply turned back toward the punch table, picked up her champagne glass, and took a slow, deliberate sip. She didn't need to chase them. They were already running from her in the only way that mattered, and the night was far from over. The crowd didn't fully return to its conversations right away. Instead, a ripple of hushed voices moved through the room like the sweep of a camera pan. Ava could feel dozens of eyes following her, some admiring, some shocked, and some calculating the way people in fashion always did when they sensed a moment that could shift reputations. She let them watch. She stood with perfect posture, the stem of her champagne glass balanced between her fingers, her expression serene. The sting in Cole's eyes as he limped out was still fresh in her mind, but it wasn't vengeance that kept her calm, it was satisfaction. She'd taken control of the moment without losing herself to rage. That was what they would remember. Her friend and fellow designer, Marisol Vega, slipped to her side. "You realize half this room is in love with you now," Marisol murmured, smirking. The other half's terrified. "That's a balance I can live with, Ava," replied softly, her gaze still fixed on the door where the two men had vanished. Not everyone was smiling, though. Across the room, a pair of senior editors from a major fashion magazine stood in tight conversation occasionally, glancing at her. Ava knew the type gatekeepers who preferred scandals to be whispered, not played out under chandeliers. But their approval wasn't the kind she sought. She wasn't a model who could be blacklisted for speaking up. She was the creator, and tonight her work had been protected by her own hands and heels. A voice rang out from near the DJ booth, loud enough to cut through the music. "What happened?" A younger photographer called, holding his camera at his side. Before Ava could respond, one of the onlookers spoke up. "Cole Monroe picked the wrong woman to mess with. She about broke his foot in half." The room chuckled, not maliciously, but in that ripple of shared amusement that comes when the balance of power tips in a way people didn't expect. Ava allowed herself a small, knowing smile, lifting her glass slightly toward the speaker in silent thanks. Marisol leaned closer. "You should say something. Everyone's hanging on this story, and if you let it hang too long, they'll fill it in themselves." Ava considered it for only a second before stepping forward into a small open space between tables. The conversations hushed almost instantly. She didn't raise her voice much. She didn't have to. Some people think they can touch whatever they want because they believe the world was built for them. She said, her tone even but sharp. But in this industry, in any industry, respect is part of the work. And if you don't give it, you won't last here. It was short, deliberate, and left no room for misinterpretation. A few people clapped. Others simply nodded. And Ava could feel as tangibly as the bass through the floor that the energy in the room had shifted fully to her side. In the far corner, a member of the venue's security staff had appeared, speaking to a waiter who nodded toward the exit. Ava didn't need to guess the topic Cole and Ryder wouldn't be returning. She finished her champagne, set the glass down, and smoothed the skirt of her gown. The night wasn't ruined. In fact, it was just getting better. The chandeliers cast a warm golden haze over the ballroom as the party regained its rhythm. The DJ mixed a new track, and the clink of glasses resumed, though the undercurrent of what had just happened still pulsed in the air. People gave Ava a little more space now, not in avoidance, but in respect. It was the kind of invisible barrier reserved for those who had proven they could hold their own. Ava found herself near the dessert table, nibbling at a macaron while chatting with a boutique owner who had once been hesitant to stock her line. Now, the woman leaned in with genuine interest, asking about her next collection and hinting at a larger order. Ava recognized it for what it was, not just admiration for her work, but recognition of her personal strength. From across the room, she caught sight of the security guard returning, speaking quietly to the event coordinator. She overheard just enough to know the men had been escorted out without further incident. Good. No second act. No chance for them to reclaim the spotlight. Marisol reappeared at her side, pressing a fresh glass of champagne into her hand. You do realize you're going to be the headline tomorrow, right? Ava smiled faintly. Then I'll make sure it's for the right reasons. And she would. The photos already circulating on social media, she'd glimpsed one on a stylist's phone, showed her poised, her heel still pressed down in that exacting moment of impact, Cole's face twisted in shock. They were powerful images, not because they glorified violence, but because they captured a woman refusing to be diminished. A few younger models approached two women, and one man, their voices tentative. Miss Monroe. One began, we just wanted to say thank you for not letting them get away with it. You don't know how much that means to us. Ava felt the sincerity in their words, and it landed heavier than the applause earlier in the evening. You don't have to tolerate disrespect, she told them, her tone gentle but firm. Not from anyone. Not here, not anywhere. They nodded, visibly moved, before drifting back into the crowd. The rest of the night passed without incident, though Ava noticed how the energy around her shifted. People still complimented her designs, still toasted to her success, but now their eyes held something different, a layer of regard that went beyond fashion. She had always been respected for her work. Tonight, she was respected for her presence. As the evening wound down, Ava slipped out to the quiet hallway leading to the coat check. The noise of the ballroom faded behind her, replaced by the soft click of her heels on marble. She shrugged on her coat, the silk lining cool against her arms, and caught her reflection in a tall gilded mirror. Her lipstick was still flawless, her hair still perfectly in place, and her gaze carried the calm certainty of someone who knew her worth and would never let anyone take it from her. She walked into the night air, the city lights flickering like camera flashes in the distance. The cold breeze brushed her face, and she felt the satisfaction settle deep in her chest. Tonight, she hadn't just defended herself, she'd sent a message that would echo far beyond the ballroom. Strength isn't always about force. Sometimes it's about precision timing and the courage to act when it counts. Ava's choice to confront her harassers wasn't born of anger alone. It came from an unshakable understanding of her own value. In an industry where image can be everything, she proved that integrity and self-respect matter more than applause. The bullies learned that arrogance collapses quickly under the weight of accountability, while others learned that silence is never the only option. The lesson is clear: when someone tries to reduce you, stand tall and make sure they leave knowing you can't be broken.